Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chat with Israeli writer Chaim Nol, author of several books and currently living in Israel in the Negev desert. The title of our conversation today is Israel as a Model of Civil Society. And the title it's inspired mostly by terrible propaganda that you hear in the news and that has been spread for years and years as Israel as the opposite of what the state really
Yeah,
is. So, Chaim, why do you think we have such a discrepancy between the reality of the state that it's multicultural, open, democratic? Let's not to forget democratic in an area where there are only totalitarian states, and the narrative that the media is pushing that it's completely contrary to reality.
hmm. Yeah, it's difficult to understand from our point of view, and I think it was meant from the European media people also as an instrument of pressure against Israel all the years. So it's no secret that most of the European media people are sympathizers with the case of the Palestinians since long, and they use the negative narrative and the very negative picture uh, they display in their media. Also, they have used it as a measure of pressure on the Israeli people, and many people here have been all the years concerned about it and influenced by it. The cultural sector, for instance, and the Israeli intellectuals who were interested in good relations to the left intelligentsia in Europe. But the new situation here at the moment is that most people don't care anymore about what European media report. That's a that's a complete change towards 20 or 30 years ago when I came to Israel 30 years ago. Um, Everybody here was always thinking about how is our picture abroad, how do the European and US media um, look at Israel. So this is gone almost completely at the moment. It has to do with the trauma of the 7th October that is so heavy that most Israelis don't even care anymore what the International Court of Justice says or what the European media say. So this is a complete change. And I must tell you that I have always thought in the last years that the last instance here, or the instance that makes the decisions and that makes the real cause of the events, is the Israeli people and not what people abroad say about us. And now the most of the Israeli people see it that way, that they don't care anymore. Whatever we do at the moment, they see that it is a necessity, although it may look cruel from the outside, it may look heavy, the bombings in Gaza and so on. But I think that the overwhelming majority of the people here is convinced that it has to be done. The majority wants the Hamas destroyed, or at least in a way out of power, that they can't do any harm anymore. So that we know that even if we let remnants of them or something, it will recover and do harm anew. So people want the war this time done up to the end. The Hebrew we say ad hasov, to the end. That is the formula when government members go to the troop and talk to them, they have always to say this ad hasov, because people want it this time. We had the war in 2009, we had the war in 2012, in 2014, not finished, always under international pressure. These actions were stopped at a moment when we could have destroyed Hamas at the right moment still. And all these procedures of prolonging the inevitable has led to the 7th of October 23 that did unspeakable harm to the Israeli people and has revived the old traumatic memories. Also what has happened in Europe. Israeli people are not really, they did forget that they have been persecuted in Europe. So negative covering in the media is not something we suffer from anymore. So we are ready to ignore it.
Well, but sure, this is good news on one side, but on the other hand, it is a very bad news also for I wouldn't say just European, I would say Western people that are in a situation where they do not, they are not informed anymore. I mean, of course, there is always a minority, the fanatics, the anti-Semites in society, but even a person that doesn't have a judgment, that doesn't know the history or the situation, and is bombarded daily by disinformation, by images that tend to trigger the emotions. And you know, if you see, for example, one example, it looks, if you look at the news everywhere, from Europe to United States, it looks like there is a civilian population and an army. There are no combatants on the other side. There is civilians and an army.
Yeah, this is something also the Israeli people have realized now, that the Gaza population is not really a population of civilians. I just yesterday read in the synagogue in one of the religious reviews that are laid out about, and that's the same what my grandchildren told me who have been in Gaza as fighters of the army, that they were shocked about the collaboration of the populace with Hamas. The old narrative was that the Gaza civilization, the Gaza population are civilians, innocent in what happens, used by the Hamas as a human shield. And now the new view of many Israeli people here in the country, especially of those who have been in Gaza, is that it's not the case, that the populace of Gaza has all the years backed what Hamas has done and is still collaborating with them. So one popular Israeli singer, Idan Amidi, who is very popular here also as an actor, and who was heavily, seriously injured in Gaza and recovered in the hospital with burnings and broken limbs and so on. He gave a press conference 3 days ago or something and said that what he learned, and this is the same what my grandchildren told me, is that there is really weapons in every house, that they have the entrances to the tunnel system in almost every house. So there is not such a thing as a millionfold innocence in Gaza, we have to deal with the fact that Hamas has made the population of Gaza widely their collaborators and helpers over the years. Not, I must say, what helped them, of course, was the European money they got all the time. So the good news for us is, for instance, that the leading Western countries, United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Italy, Finland, and others have stopped the payments for the UN as a helping instance declared UNRWA institution that has widely been controlled by Hamas and misuse the money, obviously, to support terror in a wide scale of activities. And this is what we have to learn, that and what most of the people here now understand, that the old narrative of the innocent population of Gaza is not obviously not true. So that's why when European or US media report that here is a heavily armed militaristic state bombing the innocents, it's not something that reaches that has any influence on the Israeli people. The problem of our talk today is that you in Europe have a complete different problem. You have a problem with disinformation every day that really reaches the people in Europe who believe much of it. Whereas I live here in the surrounding of people who only laugh about that. So that's a big difference between us now.
Yes, but this has political consequences, because when you turn the head of the average citizens or of the average Joe, you make them believe a lot of nonsense. And when people start believing nonsense, this is always politically dangerous. I mean, it's you know, you were mentioning before, even Israeli academics that were believing the pseudo propaganda coming from
many years, yeah,
whoever sources, because you know this would be a discourse apart. But I mean, history, facts have always been in front of our eyes. It was not, we didn't have to wait 2023 to see the horror. If you remember that horrible phone call made during October 7th from this boy's relatives in Gaza, where they were cheering that he killed Jews. It was such he made them proud for that. But I do remember the case of Arafat Rafaya, the guy who in 2019 killed and raped the 19-year-old Ori Ansbacher. And when he was interrogated, he said, I made my parents very proud of what I did. I didn't just rape someone, I murdered a Jewish woman. So this mentality, this ideology is there. But the media, no matter where in the Western world, they do not show this. They do not contextualize this.
Yeah, no, they don't. It's a gap between what really happens and what European media report, and they use the cheapest means and the cheapest methods to misinform their viewers and readers. For one instance, we had, I think, about 430,000 younger Israelis called up to the army. 530,000 people, and there was only one case of objection. There was only one young guy from Tel Aviv who objected. But the media in Europe, really, I learned from the friends who work in German media and knew about this fact that he was the only one of 530,000. They reported in Germany that there was a broad movement of objectors coming up, and they of course, they made an interview with him because he was the only one they could interview, and said for the many behind him, it's not true. It's a pure lie. So what can we do with lies? We can try to counter them by telling people that it's not true. And as far that my influence reaches, I will try to do so. But if European people like to live with lies, so it's their problem. So we can't help them. We have to do the job here, nevertheless. So the army will do it up to the end this time. They have to do, because the majority of the populace wants it, and even the politicians who always have stopped the process here in 2009, 2012, 2014, it was always the situation that the army leadership and the majority of the population wanted to do the job up to the end. And always the politicians, under the influence, and of course the intellectuals, under the influence of the general opinion in the Western countries, gave in and stopped it before the work was done, and it allowed Hamas to broaden its tunnel system and to recover and to win more and more people to help them. And in the end, it was a catastrophic outcome for the Israelis. We had to suffer here from this. And European people are far from here and have a comparatively comfortable situation. So I think this has everybody here understood, and that's why it will be done this time up to the end, I'm sure. And if it takes still months to bomb Gaza.
Yeah, but the point is that the image that has been given is so contrary to reality that this might, my point is that could have a political impact. You see the pressure that the United States is making on the state of Israel comes from this disinformation. And I just want to be, nice and just talk about this information, because if you ask me personally, I do believe that there is some funding behind, that there is some money running to
of course
all of this. But fine. It's like the story that came out now with the U.S. colleges, where Qatar is founding Department of Islamic Studies.
Saudi Arabia, yeah, but it was known already since years that these Arab countries give a lot of monies to Harvard and these colleges. And so if you wanted to know, you could know. So that's why it's not surprising that these three women gave such a strange statement at the Congress, and they felt in harmony with what happened there over the years at their colleges. And the problem was then, I must say, that the Jewish sponsors started to drop and to use their influence. Finally, we have seen all this, and we know that there is a gap between what we have to live here and to experience in reality every day and what the European media and politicians declare. There is a certain difference also this time with the American government. Even Biden, who is not such a big friend of our government, and but even who doesn't try to stop Israel at the moment. He cannot afford. It has also to do with strange hesitation on October 7th. Many people here think that the fact that it took 5 or 6 or 7 hours until our army reacted to the reports of, to the pictures of breakthrough at the border and so on, that this was on, let's say they had to coordinate first with the American government, our government. And this is something, it's an accusation that is here in the air, that many people think that the fact that, let's say, some 100 Israelis still could be murdered because of this delay of some hours, when the news was told. I mean, we know that Israeli government would never start such a war. We all knew since years that once this war would be started, it would be a hard and long war of some months with a lot of casualties. And of course, to start such a war is from side of our government always only after they had a telephone conference with Washington. And this is what everybody knew here, that these strange 7 hours. We all have asked ourselves, why did it take 5 to 7 hours? I know the distances here. I live 40 kilometers from Gaza, and we are surrounded by troops. There was obviously no order, 5 hours for the troops to. So this is something most Israeli people know, and also the American Jews know, or are informed by. We have our own information system between the Israeli Jews and the Jews in the United States. And if Biden wants to win the elections next year, he needs the traditionally democratic votes of the American Jews. I think that 80% of the American Jews vote for the Democrats. He will not risk these votes. It's like that. So we know that there happened something strange in these 5 to 7 hours, that the American government obviously was not happy about the idea to react. That would meant a big war, as we see now. And that they made it happen at least some hours later, after some talking, maybe with Saudi Arabia. I don't know with whom they had to talk. Here is a process. I mean, the American interests are in another perspective and another dimension than our interests here. We have to defend our borders. The American government has broader interests here. There are alliances with Arab countries. You know that it has started with Trump and was continued, that the relations with Saudi Arabia were almost at the point, short before, that they would have accepted the existence of Israel and started diplomatic relations. So the Hamas action had also to do with that they wanted to thwart this process. And I think that these 5 to 7 hours were the time when they thought about it and wide all possibilities in the United States. But here it meant that people were killed. That's the difference. On one side, there are strategic considerations and in a broader frame. So here, some kilometers from Gaza, you see it in a different perspective. We live here 40 kilometers from Gaza. Our place, it's a relatively small little town, let's say. In the meantime, we don't know exactly the numbers, 7,000 to 10,000 people. It has doubled. When we came here, it was only 4,000 to 5,000 people. This place was on the list. Our place was on the list of the places Hamas wanted to ransack and kill the people and rape the woman this day. So for me, it was, especially when I learned this, that we were on the list, shocking, because I was abroad that day. So my wife was alone here in the house. And the idea that they could have succeeded, they came up to Ofakim. Ofakim is 23 kilometers from us. So we had them here 23 kilometers far from us, killing and doing all atrocities. And this strange difference that made it possible that they could move from the Gaza border, these 20 kilometers in our territory, it is because of the hesitation of the government to give the to give order to the army to act. And we don't really believe that it was only the responsibility of our government. I mean, it is clear that our government has to retreat after the war. There's no question. No one is doubting that. Also, the chiefs of the army and the intelligence and so on have already announced that they will retire. We are quite sure there will be elections. The ruling party, the Likud parties, has very bad numbers in polls, because everybody thinks, was it right to delay it on the pressure of someone? And there is only one power in the world that can Israel, that has so much influence here, that there are hours. I mean, this is absolutely untypical. So usually Israel reacts extremely quickly, and that it didn't happen this day, there is only one explanation. And I think this has influence now on the relatively moderate position of the American government, that does not do real pressure on Israel at the moment. And they announce that they have not endless patience. But so what can they do? If the war takes another half a year or so, they can't do anything. They have to accept it. The Israeli people will not stop this war until Hamas is out of power and out of the Strip.
But since a few years, the IDF, the Israeli army, is dependent on the military production from the United States, especially for its aviation, bombs, parts, etc. Everything is produced in the US now. Israel was self-sufficient until a few years ago, but now it's not anymore. And that was, I believe, the point of Blinken when he was in Israel during his talks. And it's also a very strange situation if you consider that a few years after becoming a state, in 1956, during the Suez Canal crisis, the United States wanted also Israel to stop, to not do anything, and they imposed that on England and France, that they retreated their ship, but only Israel kept under Ben Gurion. And I think it was was Ben Gurion or Moshe Dayan, I don't know. Anyway, but
as
Israel,
a prime minister, then Ben Gurion, I guess it was still Ben Gurion as a prime minister, yeah.
Ben Gurion said no to the United States, while
Yeah.
France and England had to say yes. And you see the huge difference between then and now is that even if as a young state, Israel was still military self-sufficient, now it is depending from the United States for a large part of its armament.
Yeah, it's true, but I think that the cooperation between the Israeli and the American army is not at stake. There is a different relation between the politicians, who always have to think about their next election and their popularity, and the army leaderships of both countries, who have not to think about things like that. So we had often the situation that the American government gave statements urging Israel to do that or this, but in the shadow of it, the cooperation between the military leaderships was unharmed. I think that Israel is, for the United States, an strategic asset. They can never take at risk, and they know that. So there is only one country here in the Middle East that is, in a certain sense, when you look at the world maps, the central point of all the strategic considerations you have to do. So there is growing confrontation between the United States and China, for instance, not only in Taiwan, but also here in the Middle East. China is supporting Iran financially. They signed this treaty in 2021 in March, China and Iran, that gives Iran every year $20 billion for raw oil. And this money has stabilized the mullah regime in Iran that was on the brink of collapsing before. They had a lot of resistance in the country. They still have, by the way, but they were also financially in dire straits, and they are not anymore. So they are affluent anew because China is financing Iran, and of course they do it in consideration of the situation, trying to become, or let us say, to break the dominance of the United States here in the region. So, and the United States cannot afford to lose this region. This is as a central point of the world, not only for raw materials, but also strategically seen. Also, the Europeans cannot afford. I mean, it's easy to imagine what would happen if Israel would not exist here, and all the coast of the Mediterranean was Islamic. So what protection could Europe bring against that? What could happen then? So the Chinese one road, one belt strategy is clearly aiming at going up to the Mediterranean, so they had hoped to go via Iran, Iraq, Syria is powerless anyway, to Lebanon, where they have the Hezbollah paid from Iran, so let's say paid from China in the last instance. So I think it fits to the one road, one belt strategy going toward the West. We all think China as a country with no world power ambitions, but that's not true anymore. So it has changed dramatically during the last years. China was a country that had no ideas to go west and using strategic points and so on, but it happens now. And the United States are in a position that they have to make sure, and that's why also these alliances with the Arab states who are against Iran, so that's a big conflict we have here, is not between Israel and its neighbors so much anymore, but between the big Sunni Arab states against the Shiite Iran. So there's also an old inner Islamic schism that breaks up again. And there is a real war between these Arab countries who feel threatened at the Gulf, directly facing Iran at the other side, and all their gas exports and so on, and oil exports. And Iran makes it sure with paying for the Houthi rebels in Yemen to bomb the ship lines. So the United States have 1,000 reasons to protect this region, and there is only one country they can really rely on, and this is Israel. And so that's why I cannot imagine that the alliance between Israel and the United States can really be harmed by any politician, whatever the Democratic Party or whoever thinks about it. There are still so massive economic and military interests in favor of this strong relation between Israel and the United States.
Well, but you do know that American politics is not monolithic, and what you say, it's absolutely true when you consider the politics of the Pentagon or the State Department, but it's a lot of moving parts. And I mean, you for example said that Europeans understand that they cannot afford to lose Israel. I'm honestly not sure that they do understand this, because if the European politicians or American politicians would have any understanding of this, they would not have created the homeland situation that they've created everywhere in the Western society. And I mean, I include Australia down there, where you had after on October 7, people screaming horrible slogans in front of the opera, or the three you referred before, the three presidents of three major American universities. The Harvard is the oldest university in the United States. It's even older than the United States. Not understanding basics of morality, of culture. So you see, when we do not have sense makers, where do we expect politicians that are, usually not the most brilliant mind that we have, to gather
or too old, by the way. I mean, the current American president is a very old man. Old people are slow. I know it from my own. So he is 81 years old. It took him obviously hours to come to a decision. So that, of course, we have to take this into account.
He met Golda Meir, you know?
Yeah.
Was
really? Yeah.
So that's also on top of everything, because I mean, in Europe or in other countries, you can hide the fact that the president is not really anymore 100% sound, because they translate what he's saying. But if you watch American news, and he stumbles every second word, and this is a very dangerous situation.
It is,
extremely dangerous for everybody.
It is dangerous, yeah.
I don't believe that that the West understands the danger, isn't it? I don't believe it. We have any understanding, because everybody who talks about this danger is immediately labeled by this good people that sits in the media as, with strange, crazy, absurd names, and people who in the Congress. In the Congress are saying that the call for genocide of the Jews is a matter of it depends on the context. That's the verbatim. The media, it's a nothing. After that.
Yes, but we have to see. Of course, we have to be happy about the slightest progress in this. The Western countries are not realizing the real danger, of course, most of them. So that there are many reasons, but during the last weeks, we could observe slight progress. I mean, that two of these three presidents were enforced to step down, for instance, or that the leading Western countries have stopped the payments for the UNRWA. Unthinkable 2 years ago. I remember how often I wrote about it. So I tried to do my real work here as a writer, but from time to time I couldn't hold on anymore and had to write about this fact that they spend billions every year for this UNRWA that was clearly in favor and controlled by Hamas. Everybody knows here in the region, and used the money, misused the money, used it for all schools in the Strip established from this UNRWA. One of my grandsons has been in one of these schools. He said in every classroom there was a picture of a poor, threatened Arab girl threatened by a monstrous figure with a Magen David, with a Star of David painted on it. So the old Jew hatred stereotypes revived. So it was a matter of course in the schools of the Strip. They created 1-2 generations of Jew haters, of Jew killers. And we all knew it. And the West paid and paid. And it was clear that the money was not for the poor people or something, that went into the pockets of the Hamas functionaries who were controlling it. And the strange thing was that I wrote it all in the wind, so to speak. No one listened to that. And now it happens after so many years that they really stop payment for this institution. I must say this is a progress after all. So it's a very slow progress, and it's fairly late, by the way. So because the Muslim onslaught happens in Europe every day in the meantime. The United States have not that problem so much because the Muslim population is...
In Canada, last week in Edmonton.
Canada, right. Yeah, Canada is a problem. But the European countries are really at the point that they are threatened by, so that they start taking control there. So that they control a lot of things already. Sweden or France with Germany. It's not also the Jews there tell this, and it's a strange phenomenon that although we have this cruel war here at the moment with the highest casualties also for the Israeli army we ever had, it was unimaginable 1 year ago that we could have so many fallen soldiers in the war. But nevertheless, we have a strong influx of Jews from Europe and the United States making Aliyah, immigrating to Israel. It's a strange thing that the number of, as we learned from Birthright and those institutions, that the number of people who want to go to Israel from the United States has increased. From Europe, of course. I mean, they are really threatened. Jews in Europe and in Western Europe are really threatened. And many leave Europe now from France and Belgium, Germany, and United Kingdom. That's a strange phenomenon that we have in the middle of a war, when the situation here is really tense and difficult. Thousands of people who emigrate to thousands of Jews who emigrate to Israel. So that is an indication for the bad situation in Europe, that obviously when the Jews are not safe anymore in Europe, that has always been an indication of a crisis. So that European civilization at all is threatened. So we can say that the situation of the Jews is a certain indication for how the situation in Europe in general is, and it's bad, of course. So the problem is and this is the second big misunderstanding between Israel and the West at the moment. Not so much the United States. The United States have always been a country with a big army and fighting wars and so on. But Europe has completely lost the idea that democracy has to defend itself. And at the moment, Israel is the only country that stands for this idea, that we say Israel has I must say, is an extremely democratic country. We have a diversity of political opinions that is almost unimaginable in any European country. I know it from Germany. So they get in panic when there is a new party emerging, because they are not the old picture anymore with only 3 parties or what they had. We had here always, all the time, extremely differing political opinions. Yeah, I can say that it is every Israeli is proud on the fact that he has some dissenting ideas. When you start a conversation, every Israeli partner will tell you at a certain point, Rega, I have a completely different opinion about that. That is a part of our of our mental constellations and old traditions that we and that's why Israeli democracy is really vivid and often nerve-wracking in its diversity and controversies and so on. But the same people almost overnight could switch their identity, their self-understanding to become disciplined, going into the army, fight, ready to defend the country. I must say, I'm really astonished myself. I come from Europe. I was educated with Marxism and pacifism and so on. I have three. I had three of my grandchildren were now in the Gaza, in the army actions in Gaza involved. Even a girl, and they all came to visit us and tell us the same. They couldn't have arranged that, so they all told us the same, that they felt from the inner heart the urge to defend their country. I don't know who told them that. We didn't. I must tell you, I'm a very skeptical person against every patriotism. I come from Germany, where patriotism is a negative word. So I've never told them some sentence like, do it for a country. They said themselves. One of our grandsons said in this, in this order, I do it for my friends and I do it for my country. So the country is the country of his friends. So it is the identification with the group. They grow up here in a group of other young people who think the same way. And I'm really astonished about this generation. It is much stronger than I could ever imagine. On the outside, they go to parties and they have the newest Western, now the trousers with big holes in it and everything, as it is usual everywhere. And they look around and they travel a lot and they know about how people live in other countries. But in the moment when this happened, they all went to the army. So on my grandsons were on the first day, they went to their army unit and told them they wanted to fight. We hadn't to tell them. We hadn't to tell them, now you should. No, they did it themselves, and they don't even listen to us. My wife is not in favor of what I say here. My wife has big problems with that, especially with the girl. She thinks it's not okay that a girl goes into war. She came directly, our granddaughter came directly from school some month but in between, and then she went to the army, and then the war started. So that's the first stage of her adult life is war, and she accepts that, and she's positive to that. My wife always tried to tell her, you can go abroad, you have a second passport. She didn't listen. So that it's not that we are here the part who give the strength with our, no, it's the young generation. That's what I'm astonished mostly in this situation, that the young people have this very powerful identification with the country. I'd never expect something like that so strong, but it has rescued our lives, by the way. So we can be happy that it is like that. And in Europe, it's not like that, and they have always problems to motivate. It's a question of motivation, and I don't know what happened in Europe with the motivation, why people are not really motivated anymore to defend their countries, to stand in for the values they live on. Here it is no question. I hope that we can radiate a little bit of this Israeli spirit to the old and weak Europe, where the basic instincts of self-defense obviously are so much in decline, up to the point of that it really gets dangerous.
But it is also a sense of belonging. And I mean, when you create a society where belonging is stigmatized as in every possible negative ways, people also. I believe there is a huge difference between countries that have to fight for their survival, that are under constant threat, that they have to experience stuff like October 7th, and countries where the major problem of the young
Mm.
generation is, do I go out to that place, or do I go on
Mm.
vacation to that island, or it's it's an artificial life that the
Mm.
West societies have created, that makes people uh, not understanding the value of liberty, the value of democracy, the value of ideas. You know, when you say their values, but values is a word that now has been slandered at every corner.
Mm.
Again, we go back always to the same topic. If we do not have sense maker, but nonsense makers, because
Mm.
you see the academia's fallen, media's fallen.
Mm.
There is a big
Mm.
problem here. If
Mm.
I for a while I kept myself busy looking at newspapers before the First World War, and what I noticed is that if you read those newspapers, Germans,
Mm.
Austria, before the war, before 1914, you see that these people, the citizens in those times, are
Mm.
informed. They know what's going on. They know their reality. They know the crisis
Mm.
in their own world. We
Yeah.
don't. We don't. We do. In
Mm.
America right now, there is a big, big problem with in Texas with the border, because the
Mm.
governor mobilized the National Guard to stop the illegal immigrants and put some razor barbed wire. And the White House is working against the state of
Mm.
Texas
Mm. Mm.
to let these people in. And there's been a
Mm.
sentence from the Supreme Court. It's a real constitutional crisis.
Mm.
Nobody knows anything about this outside the United States.
Mm.
This is a situation where people are not informed about their own world. So how can you make, there's the expression, making an informed decision? How could the young generation in Europe, in America, make an informed decision when they are not informed, when they prefer not to be informed, when they prefer ideology?
Yeah.
If I, let,
Yeah.
let, let me help to understand this. How is it possible that the biggest pogrom
Mm.
after the Shoah in recent times was followed by an increase in anti Semitism instead of a sympathy and help for the state of Israel? How is that possible? If not in a climate of absolute confusion, absolute madness. And this madness comes not from the people, comes from a society that has completely lost its directions, is unable to have a moral compass, to see the reality in front of us. It is a big problem.
Yeah, it is a big problem. And the what you just mentioned, the strange reaction of European public opinion um, after the biggest pogrom we had since World War II. In my eyes, it's an indication of the very strong Muslim influence already in the European countries. I mean, most of these demonstrations were were organized, and so on from the Muslim community. The Muslim community obviously is able and ready to act um, differently from the non-Muslim young people who are, as you say, confused. So I think that this situation will um, become more urgent with the years. So there will be real danger from the Muslim minority. It's still a minority and will be for still a long time. But we know from history that motivated minorities can rule the majority. That's no, the Bolsheviki had never more than 20% of the voters, and they came to power. So because they had a motivation, and the Muslim young men in Europe also are motivated. So they are educated in the way the Muslim education system does it, so that they are born to rule, so to speak. That's what Quran teaches them, that they have to be the rulers of the world. Something that most people in Europe cannot realize because they didn't read the Quran. I don't know how many people in Europe took this effort. I mean, it's not a pleasure to read this book, by the way, and but you have to do it. You have to know it. When you have such a strong a minority of people acting aggressively, violently, and obviously ready to take control of the public opinion, as we have experienced now. The European countries were, I must say, amazingly influenced by this still small Muslim minority. So when you have such a minority in the country, you have to read the basic texts of how they are influenced and educated from youth on. So when you know that young male Muslims are told from the childhood on that they are born to be the rulers of the world because they are the only one who are enlightened by the prophet, whereas the rest of the mankind is only good for serving them. So then it's not really astonishing when they start to really have intentions to take power in these countries, and they do, and people don't take it seriously in Europe. Of course, they don't take the Muslim threat that already exists serious. They consider it a kind of something they can still control, but it's not true. I think that just this fact that after so many years, Europe has so much efforts to overcome its own old anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. I have witnessed this in Germany. The old Federal Republic, it was unthinkable up to the Muslim influence growing so much that there were anti-Semitic incidents at schools. It was totally unpopular. People had understood that it was a catastrophe of their country to kill the Jews, that this was related, that the military collapse and the downfall of the Third Reich was related with the fact that they had persecuted the Jews. It was not so much a question of morality, it was a question of that they realized that it is not good for them to be anti-Semitic. So I'm really astonished that it was possible in those countries who did so much to overcome Jew hatred and educated several generations in that sense, that it was possible that there is a wave of anti-Semitic demonstrations again. It is only to explain with the growing Muslim influence. The young Muslim were allowed. I have written a lot about this, that in Germany, for instance, everybody who made an anti-Jewish remark lost his job or something, had consequences. Never Muslims. They could chant in front of synagogues their most beloved, how is it, Hamas, Hamas, Juden ins Gas, Hamas, Hamas, Jews into the gas chambers. That was a popular slogan in front of many German synagogues. There were cameras they could have identified the people who never. There was not one case that such a young Muslim was put on trial for killing Jews in the German town, in the German capital like Paris or Berlin. It happened. So it happened many years. The politicians were too much cowards to act, to do anything. And also the justice, I mean, they feared a justice in Germany, a judge who brings Muslims for this in prison I think he has to live for the rest of his life with bodyguards. That's the situation in truth. So in reality, so there is a strong, with their terrorism and other means, they have built up a strong influence on the public opinion in Europe. And this we have to take into account. So I must say that a part of this, what happens in Europe today, in my eyes, is already Muslim influenced. And we can only hope that the young people in Europe will understand that they have to defend what they have now, their democratic societies with all the tolerance and so on. When they want to live like that any longer, they have to defend their countries against this Muslim influence. And I can only hope that they will come to this point. We cannot influence this from here. We can give an example that a democracy can be go into war and is still a democracy and doesn't become a totalitarian state or something. We are not. We are still a democracy with the people doing what they want and read our papers also in times of war. They discuss everything. And I read Haaretz today. Haaretz is extremely anti-government also in times of war. So there is nothing undemocratic here because we are a war-waging country. So they have to understand in Europe that you can be a tolerant, democratic, individualistic society, and nevertheless go into war and defend your country.
Yeah, but that's the point we were making earlier. How are people supposed to understand when all they have been told are lies? When the media keeps spewing lies constantly about the state of Israel, making fake images. I mean, let's not forget. I mean, we cannot. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to talk about the International Court of quote unquote justice and its resolution, motivated by South Africa. It's about what you were saying. Clearly, the influence of Muslim population has a role, of course. I would say that these people also have a platform to say everything, but you just have to watch in England. England is also a very because in Germany there are laws against claiming nonsense about the Shoah or the Jews. In England they don't. And if you watch the British channel, these people have a platform. And there is no counterpart. There is nobody saying he is saying nonsense. And they have also techniques. They have very specific techniques. If you have watched there are two famous important interviews between Douglas Murray and two of these guys. I don't want to pronounce their names because they disgust me. But during this Piers Morgan show, now you see that Douglas Murray is trying to reason with them. They don't care about reason. It's not their point. Their point is to say Israel is an apartheid state, genocide, to vehiculate, as it is typical of propaganda, a few keywords that go to the people, that appeal to the prejudice of the people. And on this, I would like to quote a very important study made by two economists by the name of Voigtlander and Vogt. They analyzed. It's an incredible study that the German towns where the Jews were blamed from the Black Death a few centuries ago were significantly more likely to vote for the Nazi 600 years later. You see, I see, for example, from what we see right now in society, it is emerging problem that, of course, is motivated also with the investment that comes from this sovereign state fund with 3 trillion from Saudi and Qatari.
mm,
I'm sure that some money is pouring into our media from this
mm, mm,
fund. But
mm,
there is also a cultural problem, as the
mm,
study of these two economists shows that 600 years later, there were still traces of Jewish hate in
mm,
this. So if we do not, the point is that we should work on a re-education, or at least on
mm,
education. But again, then we go back to our three presidents
mm,
front of
mm,
the Congress that do not have any basic understanding. So the
mm,
sense makers are missing, and the nonsense makers
mm,
are
mm,
private.
mm. Yeah, it's a European problem, I would say. So we, as an Israeli, I can only be sorry about that and sad. And of course, there will be an awakening one day, maybe a bad awakening, but European people will have to defend their countries and to muster up their own strength again and to return to their values and think about what they want and who they are. I'm quite sure this process is underway already. We say there is a tendency to vote for the right in Europe, for instance, at the moment. You see it in Holland, in Italy, even in the government. In Germany, it's the same process. Um, I'm not sure it's so much the right. Might be that many of the young people who vote for these parties, for these right-wing parties, and there is it was a big surprise in Germany that many of the voters of the AfD, the right extreme right party, or however you want to call it, that there were many young voters of them. So the statistics were a real surprise after the last elections in the Bundesländer. I think that many of young people feel that there is something wrong with the official self-understanding of their countries, and their reaction is then to vote for such a party. I don't comment on that. I only see that there is movement. That there is movement also in the European societies. We will see it now with the next elections with the Front National, or how it's called now, National Ressemblance or something. It's a different name. Also with a new young leader, Bardella, whom Le Pen has insulated. So I'm looking. It will be really interesting to see what the reaction is in France. I don't see that all people in Europe buy it, by the official propaganda. They don't accept it. Many are opposed to it. I have a lot of European friends, and most of them are opposed to that. So you can say, of course, he knows only people like that, but there are many of them. And I think that the opinion in Europe already is very divided in this point. I have the most different experiences during the last month, how people react on the events here. People where I didn't expect it are suddenly pro-Israel, and other people I thought reasonably thinking people turn out to be frightened by the idea that we have to go into war, for instance. So we cannot do anything else than show the world that it is possible that a democracy wages war. And even I mean the wars Israel had to fight until now were relatively with low casualties and low damage in the own territory, this is obviously over. So we have to take a lot of um, so we get some blows also here in the hinterland. It's not that unafflicted anymore. So we were accustomed to live here completely safe. This self-delusion is over. We know that it is really threatened. We are really threatened every day. So I told you that my place here was on the list of no one could ever imagine that. But they came very close. So after this experience, I mean that maybe people in Europe have to suffer more to learn. I don't know. I wish they could find their they could return to rational thinking without that. But if not, it's inevitable that terrorism will go up. That they will have more violence in their towns and so on. And I must tell you that despite of all the bad what we see in Europe today, the very bad developments and so on, I'm quite sure that there are powers of resistance. It would be unnatural if Europe wouldn't have powers of resistance against the threat they have to face, and it will come up whatever the media do, and so there will be a lot of conflicts and. But in general, I'm still optimistic. You know that my optimism is undestroyable. That as an Israeli, it has to be like that anyway. But also for Europe, I can't imagine that Europe will give in to this threat and terrorism and so on. And there are maybe other dangers too. Nobody knows what Russia is planning for the next decades and what can happen there. I know that countries bordering to Russia, for instance, Finland has bought Israeli rocket systems recently to defend themselves better. So also this has to be learned, that you have to spend money on your self-defense. Israel was always accused of being a country where most of the money goes into. Yes, we had to do so, and I think also Europe has to learn that it's inevitable that if you live that style we lived on such a level, with all the privileges we have, with freedom of opinion, theoretically at least, with the possibility that we both talk about these things, criticizing our governments without having to fear that we will be arrested tomorrow. When we want to live on that level, not only materially, also spiritually, with all these freedoms, to tolerate homosexuality and whatever, that if you live on this level, there will always be people who want to take it away from you. So of course the world is full of robbers. If someone is rich and has everything, others will come trying to take it. So that's what European young people have to understand, that they have to face a time. Yes, I say it. I don't like to say it, but it will be a bellicose time ahead. There will be other wars. It's not the last one. Not here, the last one. This one is not come to the end now, and we will have others. We have more dangers and on other borders. Israel has a lot of borders, and everywhere is something in preparation. So, and Europe is in the same situation in general, that they have to face the fact that they have to defend themselves.
It's a quite dark scenario, but unfortunately, it's a clear scenario, and without a clear and the main problem is that we do not have this clarity to understand and to try to look into our future. And probably, who knows? Probably we fall under the old rule that an Italian thinker named Giambattista Vico came up with about the rules of history. And history goes always, it's not a linear process, but a line that goes up and down, up and down. And we are just
Right.
in the
Yeah.
down stage of
Like a
history.
sinus, yeah, it's rather like that. I also see it like that. But there is also a period of recovery, and Europe will change. I'm quite sure it has to change, and it is already on the brink of changes. And I think that I cannot really say what happens, and I cannot predict anything. But I see that there is a lot of movement and the potential of change.
Let's hope with your attitude, All right, Chaim, we talked for 1 hour 15, so I have to thank you again for this nice conversation and the good insight we got about the situation in Israel, and also what's the state of, or the sad state of our world now. So I can wish you a great rest of the day, and thank you again, my friend.
Yeah, thank you very much. I only want to add that we are at the point already that we don't see it as a sad picture anymore. So we think reality, facing reality is always better than dreaming on. So that's why a bad awakening is better than sleeping on and being killed. Okay.
All right. Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.